Welcome to the Growth Officers Association Growth Series podcast. I'm Kim Pack, board member at GOA, and GOA is a nonprofit organization that creates an ability to bring growth leaders together to really network, learn, and create a community where we can share information. We are thrilled to bring you this podcast series where we will talk with growth leaders throughout the GovCon community. And our format is on demand, so you can take it where you are and when you need it. Today, we have Kendall Holbrook, CEO of Dev Technology Group here in Reston, Virginia, as our guest. Welcome, Kendall.
Thank you.
You're CEO of Dev Technology Group. You actually started there, a few years ago as Vice President of Business Development.
Correct. Yeah.
And because of your success and your leadership skills, you were promoted is a strong word, you were named, maybe it's not strong enough, you were named CEO in
That's
2018.
Correct. Yep, correct.
Before you even went to Dev Tech, you actually were at EDS for a little over a decade.
Yes.
Really working from a perspective of engineering,
Yep.
IT, and all of those pieces.
Marketing, finance. I did a lot of things at EDS and ended my tenure at EDS in business development and strategy. So I eventually got to BD in growth and strategy, but it was a very winding road at EDS.
Yeah, and I think from that perspective, you used a word that's my favorite word. I'm a strategy enthusiast, just like you are.
Yes, I am.
And when you're looking at a company and as the CEO, overarching for everything, strategy becomes extremely important.
100%.
Can you talk a little bit about your key strategies that actually got you to the growth trajectory that you're on today?
Yes, of course. So our strategy practice, and I call it a practice because you have to develop a pattern that works for your organization.
Intentional.
It's intentional, right? So when we started looking at strategy, number one, we brought in some support, right? We brought in someone from a consultancy to help us identify our strategy initially, and then we put some steps into place to make sure we could stick to and be accountable to that strategy. So we look at it in two ways. We look at it as long-term as well as short-term. So long-term, think 3 to 5 year goals, short-term, annual goals. And we're just really regimented in our ability to set long-term goals, then use our annual goals to achieve those, and then reset longer-term goals, right, after we achieve whatever our goal set is. So what we did, we call ourselves an emerging large business.
I feel
you. we still feel kind of small, but we're large by the government's definition. And so what we did was we put an intentional practice in place to look at how we were achieving those metrics that we needed to compete in a large unrestricted market. Right, so making sure we had the quality certs, the CMMIs, the ISOs, making sure that we had some technology partnerships and certs, like with Microsoft, with ServiceNow, and so that when we looked at our corporate resume, if we were bidding in an unrestricted space, we could check many boxes off. So that was really the core and crux of our strategy. The other piece,
real quick, sorry. Those are the table stakes.
Those
right?
are, yes.
And to be able to be in full and open,
yes.
You actually were trying to set the table stakes so that you could then go after that work itself.
100%. That is 100% accurate. Yes, we knew we needed those if we were going to ever have a chance at bidding in the full and open market. The other piece of our strategy was, what could we do as a small business before we grew out of the size standards to extend our time so that we had a transition period from being small to large.
Right.
And one of those tactics we looked at vehicles. So I always say contract is king. If you have a contract, you can get work. If you don't have a contract, you're not getting any work, right? It's really basic, and I know the GOA probably understands that. All the members of GOA understand that. So we went after some vehicles strategically, like we re-upped our GSA schedule while we were still small, so that we would have 5 years
Right.
on it as we transition to large. We went after iTest 3S, Army iTest 3S, which allowed us to bid as small and get a reserved award. But once we graduated, we would still stay on the vehicle as unrestricted. So we did some strategic things like that as well. So we got the certifications, we got the partnerships, and then we got the vehicles.
Yep.
And then we just kept collecting past performance. We went after really strategic past performance that was focused on what we do well. We don't like to do everything in IT. We like to do application development, modernization, maintenance, and then we'll do some infrastructure work in support of applications.
Sure.
So we knew who we were, and we just bid really high quality work in those areas, coupled with getting the vehicles, coupled with getting the cert so that we were prepared to be where we are today.
That's great. And, with all that success comes challenge.
Of course.
And, there are always challenges that you either have to go around, go through, or go over.
Yep.
And one of the things I'd love for you to talk about is, and you and I probably are very close to some of these challenges. Tell me a little bit about a challenge that you've had or challenges that you've had getting to the place where you can bid full and open.
Yeah, sure. So I'll talk about 2. So the first most challenging situation we've had as a company was our second largest contract at the time. We had bid it and successfully run it for 5 years. We were meeting biweekly with the CIO of the agency. We were all of our surge clins were being activated. We were doing great work. Our team was being told on a regular basis, "You're killing it." So there wasn't real reason to worry about the recompete. We went into the recompete. We were aggressive. We actually, slashed our price. We, did all the things you would do as a growth strategist, and we still didn't win. And it was shocking to some of the clients who weren't involved in the source selection board. Ultimately we made the decision that this was something we just needed to go through. Transitions take a long time. We were extended a couple times by the government. And eventually we chose to just leave the work alone and keep our people. And so while we lost a few people, some people made life choices, right?
They
had to make the change, and we opened the door and said, "You can do that, and always know that we're here if you ever want to come back." But for the vast majority of our employees, we were able to keep. Some we put in an R&D role to develop some solutions and technologies that we could present to the government. Most we were able to put on other contracts, and so. Within less than a year, we were able to rebound on a contract that was, over $10 million a year, right? So, which is huge
yes.
When you're emerging large, right? That's a huge contract. And so we were able to rebound really quickly. So that was one hard one, because when you looked at all of our numbers, they looked terrible.
So you had to make the hard decision to say, we're walking away, we're keeping all of our people, we're not laying off. And we're going to do good work for them and for the customer.
Exactly.
So you had to make that hard decision as the CEO.
Yes. And it was our C-suite team, and we presented it to our owners, and we just said this is the right thing to do. We were all in agreement. 100%. There were great people. They are still great people, and most of them are still with us on that contract that we just didn't want to let go.
Yeah.
And they didn't want to go. So we found a way to work through it. And we had the wherewithal and the approach to strategy to make investment, right? That was a year of investment. That's what we call it.
So your profit may not have been as good as you wanted.
The profit was very, very pitiful that year. But we made investment, but it paid off almost, within 8 months, 10 months. I mean, we saw a drastic return on the investment we made. So that's one. I think the second biggest issue is one I think you know well, is being a emerging large mid-tier company and trying to bid on unrestricted GWAC vehicles. I mean, that's the other biggest challenge. We're still fighting that today. We are still targeting agency-specific vehicles because they tend to be easier to get on. We are taking some big swings at the GWACs. We are getting creative with our strategies around GWACs. But that is probably the biggest challenge that we wrestle with on a regular basis.
And just from my background, I see that all the time.
Yes.
And now I'm living it as well because like you, I'm an emerging,
Yes.
large business. One of the things that I think is interesting is how much you put yourself out there to actually fight for this emerging large, where the government may say we only have small business and other than small. You're out there fighting for this mid-sized group to make sure that we are able to show our worth in a way that doesn't only work for scorecards. Exactly. And so appreciate the work that you've been doing there. Can you talk a little bit about that? Do you mind?
Sure, I will. So, I, about a year and a half ago, in some conversations with a few folks in industry, with a consultant, with our internal team, and then just with some other mid-size emerging large companies, we decided that we were going to band together and try to do what we could to influence the Alliant 3 vehicle, right? And do that influence directly to GSA through some lobbying, through some white papers, through some articles that we had placed. And it really was just to get GSA to open the aperture a bit and consider us as mid-tiers, right, in this vehicle, because we saw we had Polaris for small businesses, and now we were going to have Alliant 3 for larges, but most mid-tiers just would not make the cut to get to that 60, 70 awards that they initially were planning. And so we spent a year and a half and we did lots of things, all the things that I mentioned, and we're still fighting. And right now we have an alternate strategy. I don't want to tip my hand too much since we're
not out yet.
It's not,
I'm sorry, it's not due yet.
It's not due yet. We're in the middle of this. So we're still working on it and trying to open the aperture. We do think we made a little progress. I mean, we did see some changes to the vehicle, to the procurement. We wanted more. We always want more, but we did see a little bit of window opening for us. So we hope that's due to some of the efforts that we played over the past year and a half.
Yeah, and so I want to step back for a minute, talk a little bit about your role as CEO. Sure. One of the things that I've known you a long time and truly admire, your passion for the work, your passion for leadership. And because you have been such an influential leader, just like what you're talking about for Alliant 3 and making those small incremental changes, a win's a win. Your role as CEO, how do you see that in your company, and what does success play in that?
Sure. Yeah, so I'm fortunate. You mentioned I've been at the company for a long time. I've been at Dev for 14 and a half, almost 15 years. It'll be 15 in January. And I've been CEO for 6 and a half. And so when I joined as Vice President of Business Development, we were really small. We were like 40 people. So I've seen a tremendous amount of growth, over like 100 million in revenue of growth in the company. When we made that transition from our founder CEO, Susie Sylvester, to me, we did it intentionally, right? Susie and I talked about kind of what held her back as CEO and what the company actually needed going forward, right? She was very inside focused. She liked to be inside focused. I pulled her out. I got her involved in some organizations like
how I met her, right?
That's how you met her.
Exactly.
I'm like, you have to come out. And so we made time for her to do that. But our org wasn't structured in a way that having a CEO who spent 30% of their time outside would really be sustainable, right? The decision-making, the authorities, the approvals, and even just the size of the team, the executive team at the time. So when we designed the CEO role that I'm in, we try to uncuff the CEO from day to day in the company, right? So internally, we have now leads for each of the major functions of the company who are decision makers. And only those things that are super important filter up to me to make a final approval. Everyone is trusted to do their job. They're experts in their field, whether it's another CT member or a VP. So for me, a successful CEO at Dev, where we're on a growth trajectory, meant that CEO needed to be externally facing, at least for a large chunk of their job. 30 to 40% of the time, I'm outside of the company. I spend the other inside the company, and when I'm inside the company, I spend time with BD and HR primarily.
Okay.
So, there's of all the other functions, yes, I'm involved in conversations and strategies and sometimes approvals. But day to day, it's externally facing, spending time internally with BD, and then spending time with HR because culture is super important at Dev.
Yeah, so speaking of that, you're really talking about your employees, your customers, and in some cases, the strategies for capabilities.
Yes.
So you're bringing all three of those together as CEO and really kind of from a perspective and an overarching mechanism, really kind of running that company, not only from an internal perspective, but branding and creating what you want folks outside to know about the company as well. Is that kind of...
That's very accurate. Yeah, that's very accurate. And from a branding perspective, one of the things that we've tried hard to do is we don't do, we're in GovCon, we don't do a lot of paid marketing or any of that stuff.
Right.
Our brand is really developed by our people engaging in the community.
Right.
So that is what we do. We send our people out to engage in the community, but I personally go out and engage in the community. It happens. It happens that I like to do that, right?
Right.
I'm the right person for a role like this. It's not the right. Another person may not be the right CEO fit for a role like this because that externally facing might be a little bit more challenging.
Sure.
Yeah.
And speaking of that, your leadership skills show outside because of the way that you present yourself. But inside, and I talk to a lot of folks on the elevator, we sit in the same building, but I talk to a lot of folks on the elevator, and how do you see your leadership? When we talk about traits, our personality traits and the role of the CEO and what kind of leader we are, how does that work for your company? Like, how are you changing the way that you work with folks as you scale? Because what got you here may not get you to the next level. So how are you using the ability to see yourself and change as needed for where the company is today?
Yeah, so that's always an interesting thought process and an interesting question. And I often wonder, like, will the company get to a size where I'm just not the right fit? And maybe one day it will. From 6.5 years ago to now, I've just flexed with the company of the size that we are at the time. And part of that is because I'm a growth-oriented CEO, right? My number one focus is big G. I call it big G growth. I'm not BD. I'm big G because I want to look at growth in a very strategic way for the company. So I am targeting who we need to be always in 18 months, 12 to 18 months from now. That's what I'm focused on. So even when I look inside the organization and I look at our team members, our executive team members, our PMs, and all of our employees, I'm looking at where are our weak spots, where are the holes that we need to fill so that we're the company we need to be in 12 to 18 months from now. Because in a mid-sized company, all it takes is one big win.
One big win.
And you double in size or, you grow 50%.
Right.
And that's a lot to absorb for a company. So I'm always looking to try and make sure we're shoring ourselves up. So that's kind of how I've done it. I don't really think about it too much. I'm like, okay, well, when we're 500 people, I'm going to need to be a different type of leader. I know that I won't, I already don't remember everyone's name.
Sure.
Right? And I feel bad about that sometimes, but I try to be very transparent. I meet everybody. I won't remember your name initially. Remind me your name. Right?
Yes.
I try to be very transparent about it. But I do meet every new employee because I do still do orientation with every new employee. So we've structured our orientation such that myself and our president, CFO, John Mutarelli, that we meet every new employee within a few weeks of them visiting.
Sure.
Or starting at the company, yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. And, you talked about how in the day-to-day you are hooked to HR. It's an important piece. How important is it for you as you scale? It's harder to maintain your culture.
Yes, it is.
It gets harder and harder the farther you get away from all of the employees. And so how are you maintaining that culture? What are you doing? And what should our folks listening really think about, from a culture perspective, trying to maintain it?
So for Dev, because of how we were founded, our founders wanted to create a company that was a pleasant place to work. They wanted to be a little bit different than the other contractors around the Beltway. They wanted to not, manage the company based on numbers solely, but be a good place for people to come to work, be a good place for our clients to come and get their needs met.
Sure.
So our tagline is exceeding expectations by design. And the way I explain that we do that in orientation is that our number one goal is to make sure our clients' needs are met. And our number two, which is back to back with number one, is making sure each employee's needs are met. And so that is the first thing I tell every new employee that I meet, right? And I take it to heart, right? The mere fact that there's two of us who are leading this company day to day, taking 4 hours, because we go to lunch and then we do a presentation, right, with each and every employee within their first couple of weeks of coming to work, is part of that commitment. So it's important. It's really important at Dev. I knew that would be the most important role when I took over from Susie, right? Because she was so committed to the culture and was known for making sure we were a great place to work.
And change is not easy, even if it's internal change, right?
Yes.
Nothing is easy.
No.
So now you have to go out and win that respect and win all of that. Not that you didn't already have it, but I mean, sitting there and your first thing is committing to the people that you are going to be there for them. So that's huge.
Yes.
I love that idea because, today you're 500 people or wherever you are.
We're like 350.
Okay, 350. And so I was a little high. But at
we have 200 subcontractors though, so you're so not, you're not bad.
But even with that, maintaining that culture, talking about subcontractors, rolling that down, making sure that you're a good partner, all of those things take time and effort. How much time do you think that truly takes?
Oh my
I mean, how much of that is in your daily, right?
So probably between 25 and 30%. I mean, there are weeks where it's more.
Yeah.
We've built a lot of training for our people into our into the regular course of our business. We spend a lot of time training our people care managers, those who touch people, which is vastly important when you talk about culture, because they're on the front line of culture, right? So we spend a lot of time training them. We have like I think it's a 10-week, it keeps fluxing, they change it, but I think we're in a 10-week people care manager training, and I actually come to the training. I don't do all 10 weeks, but I make an appearance. I tell them why it's important. I let them ask me any questions they want to ask me. We are rolling out the Arbinger Institute, developing and implementing an outward mindset training. I'm one of the facilitators for that.
That's great.
Right? So every employee is going to go through it. So every employee will spend these kind of 3 sessions going through training with me. So it depends on the week. If we're in an Arbinger week, I'm spending way more time. But I also meet regularly. So our VP of HR reports directly to me. That was an intentional decision we made, that the HR reported to the CEO and not into the back office, or infrastructure organization, just because culture is so important. Right. So anytime she has a yellow flag that goes up or a red flag that goes up, I know about it first immediately, and we can address it in the way that aligns to our values and to our culture. 25 to 30%.
Yeah. You talked a lot about your VP of HR and your C-suite, and you've talked about your leadership team. Tell me what qualities you're looking for and traits you're looking for in your team, right? It's very personal.
Yes.
How you go to market. And so what are you looking for?
Yeah. So one of the base things when we started working through our strategy, 5-6 years ago, we brought out, and we also bring lots of consultants in. We brought in a new consultant, and they helped us figure out what we should be looking for in our leaders. And they described like a 3-legged stool model. You need to be able to buy. You need to be able to, not buy. You need to be able to sell. You need to be able to do, and you need to be able to lead, right? So it's the 3 things, and that is the triple threat. Right? And so we look for triple threats. Now,
so sell,
lead, and actually do,
and
deliver.
Be actually a person who can do
things.
Practitioner.
A practitioner.
That's
exactly.
Excellent. Okay.
Exactly. And if you have that mix and they are aligned to our culture and our values, and they can see themselves in our culture and our values, that's normally how we make the determination. Now, Yes. Some people, right, one of the legs of the stool might be a little bit weaker than the others, and we need to do some development and training. But we do that, right? Whether it's through bringing in executive coaching or whether it's sending them off to some training, whatever they feel that they need, we do try and support that with our leaders. But the most important thing is them really being able to fit into our culture and our lexicon. We don't expect everyone to match our culture. Sure. We expect them to add to it, but not take away from. I mean, if you have someone who's taken away from your culture, they can't stay.
It becomes a distraction.
It's more than a distraction. Yeah, and it harms.
Missile, right?
It harms the business.
Yeah, Kendall, listening to you and knowing, obviously my background working as a consultant for a lot of smaller emerging companies, listening to you, it's amazing at how much commitment, and I truly mean resources and money, commitment you have to training and building your internal culture and your people. You don't see that all the time. Does that, when you're looking at that, that's always usually the first thing to cut when you lose a contract or whatever the case may be, right? How have you maintained that?
So one of the important things that we focused on is, again, what are we going to need to rebound? Like when we had that loss and we now had some people on the bench doing, R&D, not official R&D, but doing solution development, technology development, well, how are we going to train them? We did have people we needed to retrain. And so we kept an eye on that. And we try to do our training in the most efficient manner possible. So some of it is train the trainer. Internally, we're delivering it. Some of it is we've bought licenses to platforms and we've integrated it under our HRIS system. And so it's not like it costs. I mean, there's cost, obviously, but it's not like it's an exorbitant cost. But we budget for it as well. So we always have budgeted dollars for training as well. We have client requirements to get to do training. So we look at it from a pretty holistic vantage point. We don't want to cut off our nose to spite our face. Yeah. If we're in a bad year and we're like, cut back everything, are we going to be prepared for the good year?
No.
Are we going to, right? Are you going to be prepared for the good win? And
are you setting yourself up for it? Exactly.
And that is how we actually think about things at Dev. I mean, we're very focused on, all right, we know we're here and we're going there. How do we get there? And then we just double down and invest. And luckily, all of our co-founders, our owners, our board are all very supportive of that.
That's great. Let's talk about getting there. Okay, because, from that perspective, you are an IT company.
Yes.
And how, when I look at this, innovation is the name of the game in most everything, depending on how you define it. How are you guys looking at innovation? How are you staying in front of or with the trends? And how are you bringing that to your customers?
That's a big question.
It is a big question.
All right.
Let's write that down.
It's a big question. And I think it's something that we strive to continuously improve on. I never feel like we have innovation 100%. You can't, because things change. Things
changes too much.
Changes too much. Several years ago, we brought in a chief technology officer. So we had a role called Chief Technology Officer. We now have a Chief Technologist. It's a different person, so we changed the title. But that is at the hub of innovation. Now, are they the only one doing innovation? Absolutely not. A lot of innovation happens on our projects because we have project team members who want to learn something new or heard about this new, product or this new capability that the product set that they're working with is going to deliver soon, and they start to investigate it. So what we try to do is make sure that under the chief technologist umbrella, that there are mechanisms for all of our employees to engage in innovation. Whether it's, we just had this summer in July our annual Tech Fest, and that
saw the signs. Excellent.
You saw the signs. Someone may have joined from your, I don't know, I don't remember exactly who, but it was open to our partners and to our clients and our employees. Right. And we basically had our project teams stand up demos or demo what they're working on or what's coming next. Like, for example, our ServiceNow team, they all came in, they were in the office, and they were demoing the new AI capabilities that are coming in ServiceNow. They're there in the commercial sector. They're not FedRamped yet, but they're expecting them, like it might already have happened now. I'm not 100% sure, but they were waiting to have access to these capabilities. So they did a demo based on some of the new AI capabilities, and everyone was able to come and see that. So that was one example. So we try to just create like an environment where innovation is okay, and then we try to intentionally identify ways to show off that innovation. Because like I tell our chief technologist every year, I'm like, just set the date. If you set the date and then you start telling people, then guess what they're gonna have to do? They're gonna have to engage in that innovation, right? We have to give them a mechanism to engage. There are people who wanna play with technology on their own time and they just are happy and do it. But everyone has like daily responsibilities and daily work, and they have to get their deliverables done for their clients. So if we create a forum, a format where they can do this fun thing and it actually gets to be shown and seen, it just feels a little different, I think.
Yeah, so that's amazing. And you talked about finding ways to show it.
Yes.
So it's a great segue to trade organizations and your volunteerism. I think, personally, DevTech does a lot, but you personally do a lot. How important are trade organizations in really being successful in this market?
Yes, so tremendously important for success. Way before I joined Dev Technology, Dev joined ACT-IAC. You know ACT-IAC well, I know, and I'm sure most of the listeners do as well. And it was recommended to Dev by a former government CIO who was working at EDS, who was Dev's mentor at the time in the mentor-protege program. And from that point on, we've been a member of ACT-IAC. And simply because it gives us, again, structures, a way to show things, ways to engage that we don't have to create from scratch, right? And so we've taken advantage of that opportunity. We've leveraged the professional development programs for our employees. I've been involved in multiple conferences, and mentoring and coaching and all those things that you can do with ACT-IAC to partner with government to really look at problems. That's another reason or another way to identify where we need to look at innovation, right? Because we're hearing from government directly what they want and what they need. And then that's easy for us to take back and say, hey, I heard this at ACT-IAC. Government is talking about this. We need to focus on it. So that's one way we focus on associations. So we use them in a really holistic way, anywhere from training to networking to, just being able to learn and show innovation. Yes. Actually, I'll mention, because anytime to give a shout out to this team, one of our teams, our cargo systems program team, our team with our client received an innovation award from ACT-IAC just this spring for an AI implementation. So again, leveraging innovation in a use case inside the government, they actually won an award, and it was pretty cool because they got to speak at the conference, and I think they're doing a podcast, they're doing all kinds of stuff.
And huge recognition.
Yeah, it's a great recognition. Yes. And then you mentioned the nonprofit sector as well. So part of our approach to engagement of our people and our culture, nonprofits fit squarely in that, especially coming out of COVID, when our employees, as I'm sure your employees, love working from home, right? I even love working from home. I do come in the office a few days a week. But when we had our first in-person service project together, the feedback that we got from people being together, not doing work, was tremendous. And there was actually a comment that said in the survey, I love being with my team, not doing client work. Like, I just want to be with them. I wanted to give back. I enjoyed, the project. I enjoyed giving back to the community. So it's kind of demanded by our employees. So we just try and funnel that into ways in which they can give back. I'm personally involved, as you mentioned, with several organizations. After School All-Stars is one. I've been on the board for 5 years now. I'm in my last year on the local DC board. I'm also on the national board for the national organization. I'm in my last year of the national board as well. But I've spent a lot of time there because it supports middle school students in really tough areas in DC that are under-resourced. So whatever we can do to support that community helps all community, right? We're helping a population that supports our whole community. So that's really important to me. I've also do some work with like Cornerstones and Homestretch. Our team has some relationships kind of all across Northern Virginia and DC. And we support our employees who want to do work in their regions, wherever they're located, if they're not here as well. So we have our Dev Week of Service coming up in October, where we'll do like 2 events a day, two like giving events a day. Most are hands-on. And yeah, it's crazy week.
But really rewarding.
Very rewarding. But like me, I'm trying to get to as many other events as possible. So I'm like running all over the DC metro area.
You are in this market, you're a speaker, you are a leader in this market. People know you. You mentor, you give back informally and formally. Can you talk a little bit about the work you do at Fairfax County Schools and the work you do for the Fairfax County government? I believe you're on an IT committee and Anita B. Okay. Like I want to give a little bit, it's a lot, I know, but it's where you are really shining and really showing yourself and bringing a brand recognition to Dev Tech through your personal community service.
So with Fairfax County Schools, there's a couple of different things. So over the years, I've participated, whether it was through a sorority or other organization, in mentoring functions with teens, tweens and teens, right? So I try and spend as much time with that community because, again, right, they kind of are our future community. They're our future workers. Right. we know. So just doing some mentoring and coaching and providing programming that allows those tweens and teens, young adults, to really kind of engage in career discovery or mentorship, wherever they need. But various organizations, various different ways. I was on the ITPAC, the IT Policy Advisory Council for Fairfax County Government. My tenure ended at the end of December last year, and I was sitting in the Northern Virginia Chamber of Commerce's seat. So Northern Virginia Chamber of Commerce, along with a lot of other organizations in the area, get a seat on this council. We meet with the CIO and his team on a monthly basis, a quarterly basis to talk about IT topics, trends, innovation, what's happening in the county. And sometimes they have direct questions they want to ask the council just to get feedback on things we need to focus on. So lots of letters are written through that group, right, to our board of supervisors to get things approved and all of that. But it was a great group. I did enjoy my time there. And then Anita B. So Anita B is an organization that supports women in IT, women in technology. Right. It's a global organization, headquartered in the United States, but a global organization. So I've been actively involved in their annual conference. I've spoken 3 times at the annual conference, and I'm speaking again for a 4th time next month, October. We're not in September yet. In October in the annual conference in Philadelphia. I'm sitting on a panel that we put a proposal together, and we have a panel of CEOs, female CEOs who have made the leap to become CEOs, right? And what does that look like, and what does that mean, and how can others, right, get on that path to leadership and or start their own companies? So that's what I'm talking about. And I actually just got an invitation, it's hot off the press, to sit with the CEO of AnitaB.org on the main stage in a panel. So that'll be exciting. I need more information on that. I don't have it yet. But so I'll be speaking a few times at the Anita B. Grace Hopper celebration in October. And then finally on Anita B, we do have a DC community that we started this year. And actually I volunteered because it looked like DC didn't have a leader for the community. And so one of my team members, actually 2 of my team members, are now kind of the leads for that community. So we got started with an event a few months ago, and we're going to have a fall event after the big Grace Hopper celebration in Philadelphia. We have a mentorship event coming up, and so we're looking for partnerships there as well.
So this kind of sounds like that external CEO, right?
Yeah,
all of these things
Yes.
actually are creating a network, creating a spotlight,
Yes.
creating an ability to learn
Yes.
and teach, all in the same vein. So coming full circle around to what is the role of the CEO and what makes it successful, you know, your passion and your motivation is tremendous. And how do you keep that up? I mean, because, you know, you've gone from 40 employees to $100 million and you're continuing to truly build that. So how do you keep your passion and your motivation going? It's not easy.
No, it's not easy, but it's fun. Like, growing a company is fun. And that's what I tell people. Like, the growth part of it is the fun part. And so I link all of that external work that I do to the growth of the company, to the branding of the company, like you said earlier. And that gives me excitement, and that brings joy to me. Working with the students, whether it's After School All-Stars or Fairfax County, or engaging in the community in other ways, and being able to do that wearing kind of my Deb Gives Back shirt, right, is exciting, because not only does it have a measurable impact for someone, whoever is receiving these services, it also has an intrinsic impact in the company itself, right? It brings joy to the employees. So I don't know, Kim. I you know what? I go home at the end of the day and I'm exhausted. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so tired. But then, you know, I'm here, I'm talking to you and thinking about all of the different ways that I've been able to engage and, you know, grow with the company and grow the company and all of that. And it's exciting. It truly is.
Well, and it's genuine. That is the one thing I will say, Kendall. I've known you a long time, and your leadership is one of, you know, you shine genuine in everything that you do. And so you can't fake that motivation. You can't fake that passion, for sure.
Yeah.
You know, we've had a great time talking here. I want to finish with speaking about just some key takeaways, because I heard some really good ones. First, the idea of defining the role of the CEO for success.
Yes.
What is that? And whether it's what you've defined it or someone else has defined it,
Exactly.
that is the start of something that's extremely important to get to the growth trajectory that people are looking for. So that was the number one key takeaway I took. The second one, and I'm going to use this, and I'll give you credit, but the trifecta, what you're looking for in a person to come on and be a part of your organization, that trifecta was really important when you're looking at it. They have to be able to sell, they have to be able to do or be a practitioner, and they have to be able to lead. And so from that perspective, when you look at that, you're creating a community of leaders that could be at any part of their career, whether they're leading and pushing up, whether they're leading from top down, but really having that practitioner's perspective to be able to put themselves in the shoes of the folks who are doing this. So that was a big takeaway. I love that idea of the trifecta. You know, we hear about it all the time in entertainment.
Yes.
I love that we have one now in GovCon. So
we should all use one.
Yes, at least we should have something, right?
Yes,
that makes sense for the company. So I loved that. The one thing that I heard that we didn't even talk about, but I really heard, and I know you do this in your private life, you have this spirit of entrepreneurship. You really do have this spirit of leading folks to be able to lead or start their own thing or, you know, be a part of something. And that entrepreneurship, to me, from a key takeaway from a company that's in their emerging large business, really does get to one of my favorite terms, best idea wins. Because now you're hearing more from your folks and you have that touch point with everyone in the company that you're actually cultivating the ability for these folks to feel that and have that. So, you know, those were my 3 takeaways. Are there any other takeaways you'd like to leave our audience today?
So I'm going to just pull a little thread on that last one, that fact of being entrepreneurial or entrepreneurial.
Yes.
It's the same thing, same coin, you know, just depending on where you are. I think that is critically important. And Yeah, I mean, I guess you did hear it in what I said, but I spend a lot of time focusing on that because that's where strategy really lives, right? And I love strategy, right? I'm a strategic enthusiast. So I love strategy. And some of the time that I actually spend externally is actually doing that. Like I work with the Robert H. Smith School at the University of Maryland with their entrepreneurship center. Yesterday, I was just at Bowie State University's with their entrepreneurship and innovation center talking about being a potential entrepreneur in residence. So the more opportunity to see and build strategy, whether it's inside your organization or outside your organization, it is tremendous. And the lessons that you learn from talking to other entrepreneurs or intrapreneurs is incredible. Like the things that you don't even think about that can be applicable to you and your organization. So I love being around people with that type of energy because it does help to fuel my energy. That might be part of it too. Yeah. That fuels my energy.
That's great. And so with that, that's it for this podcast. Thank you, Kendall, so much for being on it and really giving us your insight. Look for us. We've got a lot of great opportunities coming up, events, and follow-ons to this podcast. So thank you very much.
Of course.
And that's a wrap.
Thank you.